Welcome to Crossroads. I'm Aaron Korf. I'm here with Art Ruez from Vision Auto Transport. Art, you're a legend, but for the few people out there that don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us how long you've been in logistics, how long you've been in auto transport logistics, and how long you've been with Vision.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you for having me. I am the COO of Vision Auto Transport, Vision. I have been in logistics for over 30 years. I have been in auto hauling for 19-ish years now, and I have been with Vision for the last 3 years and counting now. So
I have a feeling you didn't just submit your resume to LinkedIn to get this job. Usually it doesn't work that way in our industry. How did you meet? Julio's the owner.
Julio is the owner of Vision.
I know the family's involved. Julian also is heavily involved. How did you meet them? How did you get started with Vision?
We were at a AHA conference, and we had a mutual friend that actually introduced us. And Julio and Julian had a new project going on, and we started talking, and I thought their project was extremely interesting, and came on board, and I'm happy I did.
All right, so my first question is, I like dropping names of these podcasts because we're all friends, and I like to give them a little bit of a shout out. So who were the mutual friends?
We have Tom O, who's
love Tom O. Tom O was on the podcast, yeah.
Tom O has been a good friend, has taught me a lot in the industry. William Malden from USAL.
USAL is a very good customer of ours, and I love William. Been to dinner with William. He's a great guy.
Both those gentlemen are some of what I consider to be the top people in the industry.
Very good. So you said Vision was working on a project. Is this like a specific short timeline thing, or just a way they're restructuring the business? And then they're hiring you to come on and be COO. This is like a serious job. That's chief of operations. I mean, so they're expecting, I'm sure, you to come in and make some changes or do some things or implement some stuff you've learned. What was some of that stuff?
So one of the primary tools that I felt was needed that Vision didn't have was a good transportation management system, which is how both you and I met. You gave us a very good presentation of the program.
Other elements of operations, like what else?
The safety program was starting to ramp up. Renewing the fleet, which has been going on.
That comes up a lot when I talk to people. So there seems to be different philosophies out there. I know some companies go out and the shiniest, brightest, newest trucks is almost like the goal, like in terms of it's like a very important priority. Other people want to extend the life of their trucks as much as possible. I know from an optics standpoint, safety standpoint, hiring drivers, contracts and all that, obviously there's a spectrum there of, the older the trucks, the more difficult it's going to be maybe to get contracts, attract drivers. You're going to be dealing with more maintenance. The costs are going to skyrocket and stuff like that. So I almost feel there's like an art form, excuse the pun, an art form to when do you get new trucks? When do they get aged out and all that? So was there a change of philosophy when you first started working with Vision, or is it just implementing a plan? Or
The change in philosophy had already started by the time I had gotten there, and when I started pitching my ideas to Vision, they really ran with it. The shiny new trucks work twofold. One, to attract drivers. One of the best marketing tools for trucking companies out there is their equipment. Drivers don't want to jump in an old truck and think of all the downtime that they might have. From the transportation company's perspective, is the newer the equipment, the less downtime you're going to have. So our safety team, as well as Julio and Julian, have invested money into getting new equipment. This also helps us with the OEMs. The OEMs, especially with some of the contracts we have for some of the higher end OEMs that we have, you don't want an old rickety looking truck showing up number one, at the plant or rail or port, which doesn't look good. And the other thing is, if you buying a new car, an expensive new car, and you happen to be at the dealership while we're delivering the cars, and you ask, "Hey, is this the type of equipment that's used when you're delivering
Never thought of it from the customer standpoint, actually, with the dealers. Yeah.
an expensive car?" Right.
And like something you said about the, putting it in the perspective of the drivers. So and we talk a lot about that on this podcast because obviously it's, building up your fleet of drivers is, I think from what just talking to, I'm the software guy, so I'm not like running the show from the carrier side. Obviously, I don't hire or talk to drivers myself, but talking to carrier owners and carrier execs, the toughest thing is attracting drivers and building up drivers. And there's competition to do that. Like, so obviously one of the things that's important is coming up with a reason for a driver to work for you rather than the guy down the street or, the next town over or whatever it is. I'm a driver, let's pretend, and you're trying to, and I'm a good driver. Like whatever the metrics are to measure that a real driver, the right size trucks, the right experience, good safety record, whatever. You just happen to know that. And you happen to see me in a bar, whatever restaurant out, and I say, "Oh yeah, Art, I've heard of Vision. Like, thinking of maybe changing. Why should I work for you? What's your elevator pitch on that?"
So the elevator pitch itself is the drivers themselves, and they communicate amongst each other, and word of mouth is one of the biggest promotions for us. Vision is actually very fortunate that we have a list of drivers that we can pull from right now. As demand surges, we can actually pick from a long list of drivers that we actually do have. The drivers themselves, we also have to understand that without the drivers, we can't move cars. It's important to have good drivers and happy drivers.
Right.
And those good, happy drivers actually communicate with their friends and their friends with their friends, and they know how we do business, how we react to the drivers, how we react to them being down, any difficulties that might
What are their
arise.
biggest concerns? Like, what's the first thing that they ask about? Like, are they worried about? I mean, pay is obviously. Let's move pay out of the thing because that's obvious. Like, they're gonna want to make sure the
Consistent
pay is
work.
good.
Consistent work.
Okay, all right.
They want to know that they're going to be kept busy all the
Well,
time.
I have to ask, and I'm pausing to tell you we could cut this out if we need to, but I'm curious if you have a list of drivers as capacity grows, you have drivers that you can do, but the flip side of that would be that if those drivers are getting the work when the capacity grows, what are they doing when the capacity is down? You know what I mean? So are these drivers that you're brokering to owner operators type of situation or staff drivers? Like every carrier has a different way they do the way I know some do lease, like they lease the trucks to the drivers and their owner operators. Some of them just work with owner operators. Some of them there's W-2 staff payroll. Some of them are just heavy on the brokering side and they work with other companies. What works well? Like what have you seen that's worked well in terms of?
So what works well is a combination of both asset-based and as well as brokering some of the work out. And some of the work that's brokered out, usually you do that. Vision does that most when there are spikes.
Okay.
Right now, we do 95% of all the work in-house, and then we do have companies that we go to help us when there are spikes. And obviously, as we grow and we get more work, that list of brokered companies or companies that we go and broker work to grows as well.
Right.
So
Because they know that they
have to meet certain parameters.
Right.
They can't just we inspect their equipment. Their equipment has to be up to par with our standards,
Right.
and we do have high standards.
It's interesting. We do when we hire people for our software companies, we use personality profiles testing, right? So there's a certain personality profile that's well suited for an engineer versus a personality profile that's well suited for a customer success person, like someone that deals with the customers, like or what we call our business analyst, basically. And then, obviously, there's certain, for an accountant, it'll be a different one probably. The accountant is probably pretty close to the engineer, to be honest. But I always feel like if I did this personality profiling test on drivers, they would be interesting. Like, I think that line of work is, it's not office based, so I'm not used to like people like that. What's in these guys is, I don't know how to say it, but what makes them tick? What's their incentive? What's their motivation in life?
We select drivers that we need to make sure that they're going to be able to work with dispatch and the office, and that they have a mindset of getting the job done, getting the job properly done. We look for somebody that actually will work well with the dealership, that will work well with the OEM when they're loading. They adhere to our policies, and that they're easy to work with.
Right.
We can generally tell when the drivers, just by attitude and how their demeanor is in the office, and we'll have a long enough interview with them and kind of start
getting a vibe.
And we've been at it long enough to kind of know what those characters are, as well as when you're hiring software engineers. You kind of know
like, I think
what the fits are.
Like a driver, the ones like I meet, at least they're very confident people. I think they're very independent people. Like, and a software engineer might not be that way. They might be very quiet, very reserved. I think there's almost a sort of bravery, I think, to driving those big pieces of equipment out for long hours. It's very independent.
It is very independent. It takes a special person to be out as long as they are sometimes, and not necessarily know what their next assignment might be until later on in the day. Or it takes a special person for sure. And it is auto hauling is a dangerous career. It really is. If you're out in 100-degree weather, climbing up on the truck, you have exhaustion to deal with, the heat stroke. When it's wintertime, your decks are frozen. You can easily slide on them. Getting up and down trucks you have to be in shape. It's a special type of person that's an auto hauler. I had an opportunity to pick up some work with Volvo, but they needed December 31st, 4 loads plus some flatbeds, so 4.5 to 5 loads. Port of Newark, I forget what the official name is there. Anyway, I had one driver who had been out sick with flu, who I actually got to come out. So essentially, I was able to pull from the guys that were, I don't want to say, I had good rapport with these drivers. On the 31st of December, I told them, I said, listen, I know this is an odd request. Can we pick these up? I said, I'll be out there with donuts. I'll be helping you pull cars.
Right.
And I was out there at 6 o'clock in the morning on December 31st in snow. It was a very cold morning. We actually had to dig cars out. We had to move snow off the windshields, find the cars. It wasn't an easy task.
Wow.
I mean, the cars were buried, but I was
not
happy
forget
to
this is December 31st. Let's not forget as well.
Right. So I was more than happy to be there with my guys, because I thought it was important to share the misery.
Right.
I mean, and not just, well, hey, go out there. Go out there on the 31st.
Easy for me to ask,
and I'll see you guys. And if there's anything wrong, you can call me while I'm in my nice warm home. I think the fact that the drivers who came out to help me with that project believed in me, and as far as talk the talk, walk the walk.
Yeah,
I mean,
it paid off dividends, but it wasn't like you're doing it to pay off dividends necessarily. You did it because you felt like Human nature is the right thing to do.
The right thing to do is to be there with them.
Right.
You know, how much did I help them? Well, if nothing else, motivation.
Right. Exactly. I think misery enjoys company to some extent.
Yes.
Like, he's suffering with us.
And at the end of the day, you know what? It was a good way to spend the 31st. You know, could I have been with my family? Sure. But again, I'm obligating these guys to come out and help us with a special project. So.
Did you get more business from Volvo?
We didn't. But that's okay. I mean, so you've got to shoot your shot.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's just always been fascinating, like the psychology, and that's why we for a long time have used it heavily in our recruiting to understand like the personality profiles that. And you said it that they're independent, right? But you also said, and this is important too, that they have to be able to follow structure and rules, deal a certain way. Sometimes those two things are really like opposites. It's hard to find someone that's both independent and is willing to follow rules. That's why I find like drivers are very fascinating. I think my instinct would be the successful, especially auto transport, something like that, where it's very consistent, regimented, they're doing lots of hauls, they're dealing with loading, very heavy cars, dealing with dealerships, dealing with big corporate structure entities. Like these dealership companies are, they're part of a corporate structure entity. That when I see personality profile issues, let's say I'm hiring an engineer, that engineers should be introverted, generally not extroverted. If the engineer wants to chat and talk all the time, they're not focusing on code, they're not being as analytical. It's like generally a salesperson should be much more extroverted, right? But you don't want your salesperson to not want to be on the phone, not talking to people. So generally you see personality profiles that don't match, and once in a while you'll see a successful salesperson that isn't that extroverted, they're introverted, or a successful engineer that's in the determining factor when you could see those oddities, so to speak, is intelligence. Intelligence kind of rules all. Like if you're intelligent enough, that drive, that personality drive to be a certain way isn't powerful enough to stop you from doing a good job.
Correct.
So this is why drivers fascinate me, that they are independent. They're almost like frontiersmen type of people. Those aren't the type of people you think that can work within a corporate structure of a big carrier. My feel is if you could IQ test all the drivers, it would be surprisingly high.
Yes.
I really feel like these guys are smart guys.
They're extremely intelligent people.
Right.
And one of the things that we have to rely on them is that they are our eyes and ears at the dealerships and at the depots, and they represent us. So it's very important that you have that right person there, because you want them to be able to resolve any issues that might come up at the dealership, that might come up at the plant when they're loading, knowing how to communicate with the office when there are issues.
It's a lot.
Yes.
It's not just driving a truck.
And a lot of these guys came into this business just wanting to drive a truck, and that's what they've done for a long time. And now they have we have e-pods, we have application after application for different companies, different OEMs. Right. There's a driver now will probably have possibly 4 to 5 different apps that they have to work with. Right. So they can't just load the truck and start driving, which is what they did originally, 10, 15, actually 20 years ago.
Yeah, they didn't have to deal with any of the phone,
right.
The app,
but,
take a
but
picture.
Now because of and aside from loading the truck, they're now faced with having to inspect every vehicle that's put on there. And unfortunately, it's a necessary evil to protect everybody, protect the OEM, protect us.
If the picture, you don't have that picture, that claim is a mess.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, right.
Or
exactly.
it did,
or it did happen. Yeah,
or it did
right.
happen.
More
So
like,
we've put a lot of demands as of late on our drivers, and they do a really good job for the most part. And like every other industry, you have your very good drivers, you have your okay drivers, and you have some that aren't so much.
Yeah.
And every company has to.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone could be the top driver, like
regardless of auto hauling. I mean, it's the same all over.
And listen, you put different. I think, at least in my industry, there's certain programs that are good at supporting existing code. They don't mind repetitive tedious work. There's other engineers that are the best at architecting like new things. There's other engineers that like to tend towards the data side of things and going through gigabytes of data and querying and that sort of thing, like, you know, data mining and that sort of thing. And then there's other ones that really like the UI and the front end and the user experience. And so you need it all. Like, you really need. So I imagine some drivers that are perfectly suited.
Very
shuttles,
proactive.
Whether they like shuttles, they want to be home at night. Other ones will do the long haul. I mean, so it's just
you have to adapt and get the best out of each driver. It's almost like being a basketball coach. You got to know. Yeah. You got to know when to actually pat a guy on the back, when to kick him on the backside.
Well, yeah, there's a famous coach. I wish I could remember the name. Maybe
Jim Valvano.
maybe if it was, I forget how he said it, and maybe people can say in the comments if that's who it was, or say in the comments who it was. It was something to the effect that if his team blows out the other team, but they weren't working the hardest at playing the game, the other team was easy, he's not going to compliment them. Conversely, I don't think he used the word conversely, but conversely, if they are playing an opponent that's a lot better than them, but they bust their ass and they still lose, he's going to be patting them on the back. It's like he's rewarding the effort that they're making, not just whether you win or lose. It's not all about winning or losing. It's about always putting everything on the court.
It's a matter of motivation. Yeah. You have to know your drivers, and you have to know how to motivate them.
Yeah.
And keep them happy, keep them running, and be upfront and clear with them. When you're giving them a good load, hey, here's a good load, and when you're giving them a not so good load,
I owe you one.
Be upfront, and for the most part, they'll understand it. You start struggling and having problems when you stick it to them.
Yeah, don't mess with these guys.
No. They deserve. They're out there. They're out.
I just think they'll catch you.
They're out in the elements.
They'll smell the BS too. You know?
Right, and it's been my experience where I've had, some not so nice loads where we've really taken a driver with a lot of empty miles, but our KPIs weren't looking all that good, and I told them, listen, I need your help. I go, I know this is a bad load, and it was multi-stops, and he had to go from hundreds of miles to get to the other location, and just let him know, hey, I understand that this is a bad load. Okay, I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. Can you please help me out? If you're that sincere with the driver, and you tell him, hey, I'll help you out for the next load. Does that always happen? No. And is that an extreme case? Yes, it is, absolutely. Right. So, but we have to keep reminding the drivers, what getting the message out to the drivers as management and helping them understand what the goal is extremely important.
Yeah, communication I think is critical. So let's get to some good stuff, so people can, when they're watching the podcast, they learn all the secrets. That's important stuff. So, what are those things where you've been doing this a long time? The guys that have been doing this a long time, I've been doing software a long time, and sometimes I roll my eyes and I see someone like, I got an idea for an app. I'm like, let me tell you 20 reasons that's not going to work or whatever, right? And it's easy to be skeptical, I get that, but there are certain clear mistakes you see people doing in any industry when they're new. And what are some of those traps that you see people fall into that now with all your experience, that when you see it happen, you want to be like, put your hand on the shoulder and just say, look, you don't want to do that, or you got to be careful about this.
You can give guidance. I think experience is the best teacher. Unfortunately, like everything else, a person learns quicker when they've made that mistake, and if they can react.
What are some mistakes you've made at the beginning now that you know not to do? Not letting you get away with that answer.
So clarity is really good, and they don't have to like it, and there's a lot of times where they're not going to like what you're giving them, not like what you're telling them, but unfortunately these are things that we have to do. And again, going back to motivating them to to reach your objective, the company's objective. Early on, do you think, well, they're not going to know any better? Yeah, they do.
Yeah. I think, with software, for me, some of the things I've learned early is that with, if you're not growing, you're sinking. Like if you're not doing R&D and improving the software, somebody eventually is going to outcompete you. So you almost have to be paranoid, like whether you have good software and everything like that. I think to some extent with auto transport, if I could think of an analogy,
you got to keep your eye on the ball all the time.
Yeah.
Complacency is not part of what we do.
In terms of, has any, early, I think when my wife and I started the business early, like many years ago, like our first year or two, we were surprised by how like quickly expenses add up. For instance, like you can get the revenue. You think business is hard? Like it is probably the most difficult thing in business is finding the revenue, getting sales, because you always figure I can figure out the expenses later. I can and in the beginning sometimes you don't worry about that because you're growing the business and everything like that. Have you anything? I know you're COO, not CFO. It's like so. There's the number. In terms of any lessons you've learned over, like how margins really work in this industry.
Right. So one of the most important things that I get asked by new up and coming small companies, what's your key to success? And you have to know what your profitability is. You need to know when you're making money and when you're not making money. You don't want to move cars for sport or because they look good on your truck, because if you're losing money, that hole, you're digging yourself a rather quick hole, and you'll be out of business soon enough. You really need to know how to get good competitive pricing, how to move the freight, how to communicate with your customer, hear and understand what it is their needs are, and do what they need.
Yeah, I think if you understand what the pricing is and you can walk your customers through it, and you can say, look, like this is the true cost, and we're being efficient, or we're doing these things to be efficient, get this cost.
Having a good CFO is having a good finance person or CFO is priceless.
Yeah,
it really is priceless. From understanding what your margin should and can be, to finding money, finding the banks, communicating with the banks, having your books look good so the finance companies actually know what they're dealing with, and it's not guessing. So it's CFO or a finance person is extremely, extremely important.
Very cool. So we're going to take a quick break here for a commercial, and then we'll be back on the other side. All right, we need to brainstorm for this commercial. How do we show our audience that we're the best auto transport platform in the industry?
Oh, we need to show them our dispatch manager. Optimizing routes has never been easier.
We should definitely show them our EDI management screen. Managing contracts is simple with ClearPath's EDI toolkit. Who doesn't want to work with the big manufacturers?
These are all great ideas, but we need to highlight what makes us special.
Sure, we can talk about all our awesome features, but the bottom line is we invest in every single one of our clients, giving them the power to scale up and increase their revenue.
That's perfect. Welcome back to the podcast. Okay, so for my next question, assume your kid had some interest in the industry, would you want your kid
which he actually does, no BS.
Okay, would you want your kid to get into this industry? Why or
yes.
why not? Okay.
So yes, because it's I think I've done well in the industry. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy job. However, I don't think, and not to compare what we do with a doctor or a lawyer or another professional. However, they don't have an easy job.
Right.
Neither is logistics. So
right.
It's an extremely satisfying job. The downside of it is, you also do get beat up a lot. So, at the end of the day, logistics has been around forever. You've had Greek vessels moving
Right.
moving olive oil and wine in vases, containers.
I think it's not
hundreds of
considered the
thousands.
oldest profession. That's a different one.
Well,
but,
no,
but it's
no,
maybe
no.
the
But
second oldest.
Second oldest,
Yeah.
yes. We'll stick with
Yeah.
second
we'll
oldest.
stick with second oldest. Play it safe. So asking you as a COO, if you saw a guy with a few trucks struggling to get started, he or she hasn't really figured out, gotten their groove yet, you want to give them some advice. What do you say to someone like that?
So, the best advice, going back to what I mentioned earlier, is get yourself a good finance person. Hopefully your accountant is good enough to tell you how profitable you are. Understand your P&L, understand your EBITDA, so you can go out and ask for money. You really need to understand that at some point you need to get out of the truck, and you will have to understand accounting. One of the things that I've seen with the smaller companies, you have a lot of entrepreneurs that have multiple trucks, and they enjoy driving the truck. They enjoy loading it. They enjoy everything that is truck driving, auto hauling, and the camaraderie. What they struggle with is getting out of the truck and understanding their finances. They didn't do it. They want to have a trucking company. They don't want to learn the accounting portion of things. But things get harder once you try and understand black numbers and red numbers. That's when your headaches commence. And when is it important to buy more trucks, sell the trucks? It's not easy, and the majority of the auto haulers out there have done it, and it's hard, and you have to be focused, and you have to be willing to work. It's not easy as an entrepreneur. You're not getting very many happy phone calls.
Right.
A lot of, the phone calls you receive are, I've got a flat tire, I've blown an engine, I just had an accident. These are problems that are extremely time consuming. And for a small company, they can be devastating financially.
Right.
These are not easy things to have to deal with, and your motivation can really take a big hit.
A little thing could set you back a lot. Yeah.
Right, and a simple lawsuit.
Yeah. Right.
We, as smaller companies, if we don't do things right, it's one little lawsuit that can take us out.
What about so specifically speaking, if somebody like these smaller companies also want to get into, getting contracts, working with the OEMs, what advice would you give for that?
I mean, the OEMs are looking for companies that have a specific truck count. They're looking for a specific truck age. They're looking to see that you have an office, that you actually do have somebody that can answer the phone, somebody that can answer their questions. You can't expect to have 3, 5, 10 trucks and think you're gonna get a contract. You have to go out and knock on doors, present your company. There's a lot of knocking on doors, kissing babies, breaking bread.
Whatever you have to do.
Right. For me, with the contacts that I have, I think it's extremely important to stay in front of my customers.
Right.
I would say that's one of the most important things that I can do. Stay in front of them. There are OEMs out there that won't consider you until they see you have 60 VINs.
Right.
And that you actually can really move some of their freight. There's no. you have to knock on doors. You have to knock on doors, get in front of people, and expose your company to
Pound
to
paper.
your customers. Yeah,
Pound the paper.
there's no other way. There's no other way.
Any philosophical differences you have when you talk to other people in the industry that's not like smoke and gun type stuff? Where I'd rather do, I like this, or I think this is where the industry's going, like where stuff like that.
Yeah, we're it's tough to read the tea leaves right now as far as where the industry is going. I mean, 1 minute prices are trending up, and the next minute prices are trending down. The OEMs, there are certain OEMs that are just really flogging their carriers. Equipment, tires, maintenance, everything around a truck is going up. Fuel has come down a little bit, but outside of that, everything is up. There are, companies that want prices to be cheaper than they were, 10, 15 years ago. It's very tough,
But you can still make a buck. It's just harder. It's getting harder and harder.
You can. Being with the proper OEM makes a big deal. The fact that they know how you run, why you run, the way you do. But there are OEMs out there that just care about the bottom line.
Right.
And if you're not careful, that's
Who you get into bed with? Yeah.
that can be extremely dangerous because that'll cost you your company.
There's a lot of nervousness in terms of how the tariffs are going to affect the auto transport industry, like, of course. And it's very complicated because there's parts coming over the border for assembly, there's parts moving back and forth, et cetera. I'm wondering, though, and what's your opinion on this, is that if the worst case scenario happens, where these tariffs actually do get implemented and do affect negatively the OEMs that we depend on, that our industry depends on for their haul, I've seen in the past when there's interruptions like that a lot of times a VIN will get shipped more than once, more than it would normally because of these interruptions. If they have to move things around, because now some of this might be the inbound logistics, the parts and supplies, I understand will have probably more of a shift, but even the outbound stuff I think would be affected. And in terms of the transport industry, they might pick up more hauls because of forced inefficiencies that the OEMs will have to go through to react to these tariffs and move stuff around. Do you think that might be a potential good kind of worst case scenario? Or what's your opinion on that? My theory is it's not going to change the demand for cars. Like, people are still going to want cars at the end of the day. And if it does increase the cost of cars, it might force people to buy used cars more than new cars, right? But people still need cars.
Right.
And so transport's still going to happen. Can there be an argument made that, whether good or bad, mixing things up in this industry, as long as consumer demand stays the same, which I know is a big if, but mixing things up in a way that might create inefficiencies temporarily can lead to more transport orders? Is that too long of a bridge to cross? It certainly could affect the OEMs in terms of profitability. I mean, clearly, right? Especially temporarily.
Right.
Right. And again, taking politics out of it, whether it's a good idea to tariffs or not, long term, agreeing that it might affect the OEMs. I have this weird theory, and I'm a software guy in the industry. I'm certainly not the expert, but I have this weird theory that any temporary inefficiencies created from these tariffs will end up helping the industry as a whole, because there's going to be more hauls than necessary because of these inefficiencies, and that will only benefit carriers, my opinion.
The increase to the manufacturer's bottom line is going to be paid by somebody, and that's going to be possibly passed along to us, the auto haulers, and they may need more competitive pricing.
Right. So and a lot of that happens anyways. Forget the tariffs and all that stuff going on. These OEMs are doing those things anyways. They're not.
Right.
They don't. And there's so many times I'll have a customer, like I can have a potential ClearPath customer that wants some ridiculous rate on it. I'm like, no, I know what I pay my engineers. I know what I pay my customer success people. I know what I pay for the servers and all the other parts of the IT and all the costs of the platform. And I'm in business to make money, and that's not going to work. And and that's that. And I think that is probably one of the earliest lessons I learned in business. Business isn't always, like, a lot of times the business opportunity isn't a good one. Just because it's an opportunity doesn't mean it's a good opportunity.
Right.
And what customers want sometimes isn't something you can do business with.
Right.
I mean, you just have to be, and that's a hard lesson. A lot of people learn that when they're young.
We all would love to be able to keep the trucks rolling at all times, but sometimes it's, if you can close a loop and be a little more competitive in your pricing, you will. However, you gotta watch and see what those volumes are going to be that are heading your way.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, the good carriers are starting with the cost out of the margin, and that's what they're willing to do the work for, because they have to make money. There might be carriers out there that just trust what the OEM is willing to pay them, but eventually you're going to end up picking up that business later when they go out of business. I mean, that's
Well, listen, it's great that you have faith in what they're doing.
yeah.
That's
I mean, again, I can't. I'm not running the government. I'm not the one negotiating these. I can't. I have no say in it whatsoever. What is it going to mean for the industry? Because it concerns me. I mean, when if our customers aren't doing well, we're not doing well. So it concerns me. And what I've said to my guys around the office, I'm like, anytime I see chaos like this, it's usually a good thing. If you're a good company, a smart business, usually there's opportunity in that chaos.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah. So this is the part of the podcast where I prompt ChatGPT to come up with a question to ask you. This is what I wrote. I am sitting with Art Ruez, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Vision Auto Transport. What is a question that I can ask Art that will prompt an incisive answer about a controversial aspect of the auto transport industry? And I only did it that way because,
dirty dog.
because you're so politic. I'm gonna force you to. This is the question I came up with. What are the thoughts on how increasing regulatory pressures like emission standards to driver shortage mandates are impacting the auto transport industry, and how is Vision Auto Transport adapting to these challenges?
Oh shit, that's a good question.
It is.
So the thing is, for example, like, there's starting to be a push on EV trucks. However, with the new administration, how important is that going to be? I'm thinking that's going to die down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most important things that we're looking for is an increase in weight for the trucks, so we're able to get another unit on the truck to help everybody, obviously, for better load factors, especially with all the electric vehicles that are coming in. SUVs are not getting any smaller, so vehicles as a whole are getting bigger and heavier. So
I asked it for other versions of the question, and the second question was, how do you see the rise of autonomous vehicles and technology disrupting the traditional auto transport operations, and what challenges or opportunities does this present for the industry? And then I said another one, like, give me another prompt. What is the perspective on the ethical challenges surrounding pricing transparency in the auto transport industry, and how can companies balance profitability with fairness to customers? Which is very funny, I think, because we actually talked about all this stuff.
So on your Moroni, where it, you have your transportation costs on your Moroni, and it may say, okay, the transportation for this vehicle is, let's say, $1,500. And I've had people saying, well, you get enough money to transport these cars. And it's, well, on a Moroni where it might say you're getting $1,500 in transportation, it's not just the truck.
Right.
It's all the transportation.
Right.
Not only
inbound, outbound, yeah.
And the employees of the OEM, the processors, every last little bit.
Right.
So out of that $1,500, our piece may be $300.
Right.
And that's not very transparent, or doesn't
Yeah.
paint the whole picture.
Yeah, in terms of auto transport, like especially over the road auto transport,
Right.
It's something that you wish almost was more transparent, I guess, in terms of like PR with the customers and stuff like that.
Right. And I mean, as far as with it's a non-factor with the OEMs, because our rates are what
They
set
know.
in stone with
Right,
them.
right,
So
right,
there's nothing, that can be done there. And I don't think there is much influence with the customer pushing back on the OEM, saying, how could you pay $1,500 for that?
Right. Yeah, it's just baked in to what their bottom line price is at the end of the day. Yeah. I really appreciate you spending the time with us, Art. Enjoyed it. Always love talking with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Probably we'll see each other at this next AHA.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great time. Glad to be able to answer some questions, it was a good time.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Have a good one.